Until now, we only touch the React related topics, but we do not touch the React core functional component. So let's understand the React core concept. When we talk about the React, at first the topic comes in our mind, that is the JSX. So let's learn the JSX first. For I am already in app.js file, so if I remove that file and create React function component, this is the base or the React core. When we try to create any React function which will be used as a JSX element, this function is called the React component. So this is the function component, so this is called functional component. So I am going to function a name, same name as the file, so app. Now if I try to return, try to ping something, there in VS Code we can run our React app in our built-in terminal. So I can type npm start. It open my code editor, my browser. So if we can see, there is a syntax. If I remove this line and this line, it will work fine. This is the basic JavaScript. So what happens if we need multiple lines like this one, then we must have wrap that component with that angle bracket, with that first bracket. This is the JSX React UI to create return React component. If I save my file, it works as it is. So I am trying to create multiple tags, but as soon as I try to create, it throw error because my JSX React app has already configured with. If I go to my package, I can see ESLint. Actually, ESLint configured in my code editor. So that is the reason when it faces any problem, it throw the error. So if I save my file, it create a error. It says that you must do you want to JSX fragment. That means a React JSX component cannot return multiple elements, so it must return single element. For that, how can we solve this problem? We can solve this problem like div and put that file inside this div. This way JSX element returns the single component. So if we try to return multiple components, this way we must have wrap with something. But when we try to styling some component, and if we create a wrapper, then our style may be lost. So how can we create or how can we return multiple element without a wrapper element? If I go to my browser and go to my inspect tool, if I go to my div, I can see that in our div component I have extra another div, that means this one, but I do not want this div. So how can we solve this problem? Then we want to return multiple items without wrapper. So for that, React has a built-in mechanism called React fragment. So React.fragment it indicates that React element must be imported. So for that, import React from React, React from React. Now, how we import or how we export, we will talk about the module, that how can we import any module and how can we export module varieties way in later chapter. But for now, let's focus in our JSX core concepts. So if I save my file, it works as seems that there is no changes, but if I go to our HTML file, we can see that now I have two p element, p tag directly inside our root div. So I do not have any extra div element. So this is the this is the way to wrap multiple element without any wrapper. To make this syntax a little bit shorter, we can remove this. Inside just this empty bracket indicate that this is the React fragment. So we do not need the React import. So if I save my file, is worked as before. So this is the first thing to notice when we try to use JSX. Now let's check how can we create component, React component, and pass arguments. For that, okay, just simple type. Now if I call this function inside the JSX, I am now calling this function if I call this function outside this return statement, that function will not appear in my DOM. So to appear in DOM, we must call this function inside this return statement. So how can we call this? If I type function, it shows that this is a regular text file. It is not the JavaScript file, JavaScript function component. So how can we make this JavaScript? So for that, we wrap this with double bracket. Now this function is actually no need extra. Now this function will work and return p tag with OK element. So if I save my file, I can see now it's written as expected. So if I change my p tag with h2 tag, you can see this is returning the HTML. Now this is the pure JavaScript way. How can we invoke a function? But we are creating JSX elements, so we can call this function as a HTML wise, like fn. This is same as this one. If I save my file, I can see that another function is called and the output is same as this one. So when we do not have extra file, extra tag, we can escape this extra tag with this single tag, but we must end with the / or end terminal or /. So if I save my file, it's work again same way. Now if we try to pass anything inside this function, how can we do that? We can pass something like name. Actually name, I have to comment out this line. So if I pass function, I can say this as name and I can output my name inside my JSX. Again, this is the JSX, so I must wrap this code or JavaScript code with curly braces. So if I save my file, it returns my name. So how can we pass any argument when we call this function as a JSXY? So let's comment out this line and uncomment this line. How can we pass? We can pass name as Riazul. As a HTML, how in HTML we can create any property and give a name. So this way we can pass an element, we can pass any argument in our JSX component. So when we pass anything this way, this always written as an object. So this is 100% similar as this. That means when we pass something as HTMLY or attribute style key value pairs, this is an object. That means we must have passed an object and key value pairs. So inside my React function, it must be an object. So it will be a object. So object is always used as props in React. So props.name, that will be our name attribute or name attribute to capture. So if I save my file, I can see the same output there. Now if we try to pass an object, we in this JSX component or JSX function, if we do not return props.name, if we try to return this props, what happens? If I save my file, it will throw an error because JSX cannot return an object because this prop is an object, because I pass this way and this is 100% same as this object. So we cannot return or cannot pass object in JSX element. So how can we solve this problem? The first problem is we can solve instead of object we can use the property. This way return only the name, not the whole object. So this is the first solution. And the second solution, instead of this props, I have to convert this object into plain JavaScript text. For that, JavaScript has json.stringify method. Now if I save my file, I can see that this is now returning an object, but object is converted into JavaScript file. Text file or text string. So if I can see my text little bit clear, then how can we do? We can pre-tag, and we know that stringify has another method called null and the space separated. As actually this will be the stringify method. This way, if I save my file, I can see that every object as a regular object. So what the ultimate task was that we cannot return object in our JSX element. So now we discuss how we can pass element, a single element. But let's suppose I have a nested element. Remove this line, remove this line. Name was Yazul, and inside I have passed another, suppose this line. Now this function pass only single property called name, but this function pass two property, one name and another nested element. So if I save my file, it throw an error because remove this line, and because actually comment out this line. If I can see if I save this line, I can see that only the name portion is appear here. So how can we access the nested element? For that, React have another property called children, but as we know we cannot return multiple items, so I must have wrap with JSX with fragment. Now if we can capture the name property with that name, and the inner content we always capture with the children property. So if I save my file, I can see that this is my prop or property, and this name property, and this is the inner child or inner component. So there I use prop multiple place, but instead of props I can return this way, name and children. So I can remove the props from here. This is the same as before. Now we learn some JSX element on JSX rules in our JSX file. Let's check out some other JSX. There are some more rules, like when we try to create an one-click event, we must use the uppercase capital case C, like on click, on change. The two word separate will be as a camel case. So, and second thing, another thing is the class. In JavaScript, class is reserved keyword. Class used to create a blueprint like class component. So when we need to pass a class attribute in our JavaScript, in our HTML tag or JSS tag, we must replace class with class name. And similarly, another one is for. Again, for is a reserved keyword for looping. So when we need to pass a for property, for HTML property, we replace the for with HTML for. Let's check out these three. Suppose I am in my custom component or custom function. If I try to use a class, now if I save my file, I can see there is nothing happens. But if I go to my development mode, I can see that there is an error shows. Actually, refresh the file. It did not open. Actually, in React 18 we can use class or class name, but the recommended way is instead of class we always use class name, this one. So this is the first thing, and the second was the click event and HTML4. So let's check out. If I try to use another for, if I save my file, again it does not show any error, but in real life it may throw error. So always instead of for, we always have to use HTML for this way. And another is click event. Let's add an click event. So if I click create on click capital letter capital C small c instead of capital C. So let's see what's happened. If I save my file, refresh my page, and this is the click event, that means function. If I click there in, this is not working because on click is not a component. Actually, instead of there, instead of this function, let's apply them in HTML file, because we did not cover XML completely yet. So that is the reason sometimes it may not work. So if I copy this line with on click, if I save my file, now it shows the error that there's the on click small letter C. Did you mean on click capital letter C? That means it indicates that this is a typo or mistake. So I have to replace C with C. Now if I save my file and I refresh my page, that error is gone. Now if I click P tag, that means this one, it shows the my click events function output. So if I create class instead of class name, what happens? Let's check out. If save my file, it shows that invalid HTML DOM property class. Did you mean class name? That means we cannot use the class. We always have to use class name instead of class. So if I save my file and refresh my page, now the error is gone. This error is another thing, so we do not need to attention on this error. Just ignore this file for now. So we check the class name and HTML4. So instead of for HTML4, if I type for, if I refresh my page, it says again that you need to use HTML4 instead of for. So if I change the for to HTML4, now my error will be gone. Now error is gone. So these are the some minor things when we creating JSX. There are again some more rules, like must be written so that React or JSX can compile to HTML or plain JavaScript. That means it says that when we need to create any function and that function used as a HTML or a JSX style, that function is called React component, and every component must return something. So React component, functional or class component, must return something. And the second thing, that must be begin with uppercase so that no conflict with HTML. So that if we type instead of F, if we type capital F, means regular function Y, that it will sometimes throw error and sometimes it reduce React performance it will be noticeable when we use when we broke these rules. So instead of a small letter, we must use capital letter when we try to create any function, and that function use as a JSX this JSX way. So this was another rule. So tag name must be other than the HTML tag. So when we create any custom component, we cannot use regular HTML tag. So I cannot use div because div is reserved for HTML. So and inside JSX, if we need use JavaScript, you must use JSX angle bracket. We already saw this in our tutorial, in our discussion, that if we remove this angle bracket from our name, then the name will be a HTML plain text instead of name variable. So these are some rules, and again there is another rule that we cannot create a block level component in JSX. If we need, we must have use another options. We will talk this type of options later when we goes into JSX little more deeper. So for now, I hope that the some basics of JSX covered in this tutorial. Save my file.